Hi everyone, I hope this finds you doing well. A couple of weeks ago, I released support for TypeScript development in Lightning Web Components. In that demo and in the release notes, I said that for those that are using Illuminated Cloud with the free Community Edition JetBrains IDE, you really weren't going to see much of a benefit because those free IDEs don't have first-class support for the important languages for Lightning Web Components development, for JavaScript, for TypeScript, for CSS, for the frameworks, for the command lines, so NPM, Node, Jest, things like that. The commercial edition IDEs, the ones that are for pay, they do include all of that, and you get a really nice experience when they're paired together. Saying that did not sit well with me, and it actually is kind of a continuation of something that I've had over time, which is that I really want to provide the best experience possible for those using Illuminated Cloud with a free Community Edition IDE, understanding that there are going to be limitations. And I've looked at different options in the past. I've looked at whether I could integrate various parsers for those languages, and it's just been very limited. I decided to look again once I freed up from the TypeScript Lightning Web Components enhancements and see if the new option was available. And in fact, one was, and I'm very, very happy with it. And I've integrated. I'm going to be demoing that here. But I think before we do that, so that we kind of have a before-after contrast, I think it makes sense to show the way things work today, so it becomes even more pronounced what the addition of this particular enhancement is. And so, these are Lightning Web Component source files. There's a JavaScript file, a TypeScript file, and a CSS file. And if we look at some of the standard features that you would expect, yes, it has syntax highlighting. That's being provided by TextMate bundles. You do get some code completion, but they're very, very simple. In fact, we can see that the completion for the actual identifier that I'm sitting on, see the ABC beside it versus it being some type of symbolic identifier, like a variable or a type or something like that. That just means it found the word, that the JetBrains ID found this word somewhere else in this document. In this case up here where it was in the import. It's called word completion. And while that's useful, it doesn't really help you much when you're talking about wanting like semantic completions, syntax aware, context aware completions. And so you're getting very simple completions here. Similar with get field value. Yes, we have a completion for it here based on some very simple, not even parsing, just kind of like library file scraping for particular patterns that Illuminated Cloud's doing in Community Edition IDEs. And I can accept that, and it shows that it takes a record, but even that's not entirely right. It's taking actually two different parameters here, so it may not be the correct one. And when I trigger the ID's parameter info action, you can see it's not even showing anything. And more to that point, if I change this to be an invalid signature, we don't get any type of immediate like syntax error or semantic validation telling us that that's incorrect. I can go even further and really make it wrong, and you can see that we still aren't seeing anything about that being wrong. Get rid of the opening brace here. That should create a cascade of errors, and we're not seeing it. Obviously that's kind of a limitation. If I try to bring up integrated API documentation, I'm hitting Control Q, which would be the keystroke in Windows and Linux, or F1 on Mac. You're not even seeing that the presentation assistant is showing you that action because it got short-circuited so early, even though I'm trying to hit it and trying to show that integrated API documentation for get field value. It just doesn't know enough to try that. I can bring up a structure view. It's pretty simple. It's pretty limited. I do get some limited auto indentation. So there, after a brace, it automatically opened to a new indent level, and then after a statement at that indent level, it retained the indent level. And by the way, there's been a bug here. I fixed that starting with this release. JetBrains has a regression that was introduced with TextMate bundle files and just basically plain text files a little bit back where it wasn't doing the right thing. I fixed that. It's available whether you decide to use this other major enhancement I'm talking about or not. I know that's been annoying to people, but there's no full formatter. If I destroy all the formatting here, which I just did, and I use the IDE's format file keystroke, you can see up here it says, hey, it's already properly formatted. It's not, obviously, but there's nothing to tell it what the correct syntax is for formatting it. There is no actual grammar. There's no formatting rules in play here. So it's obviously very limited. And so we've seen that obviously here with this JavaScript file. If we go over to this TypeScript file, we'll see similar. I'm not going to go through the same thing exhaustively, but there's no error reporting. While there's static types here, there's nothing here about inferred data types here. The code completions are, for all intents and purposes, simple and non-existent. Yes, there's a target, but is it a target from event? Is it a target from HTML anchor element? Where does it come from, right? So that, very simple. This worked quite decently in Visual Force and even in Aura. But when you start getting to Lightning Web Components, especially if you're adding a lot of type information in JavaScript via comment-based type hints, or in TypeScript where everything is statically typed or things are statically typed, it falls pretty short. If we go over to CSS, again, we've got some code completion. We can see that it knows about border as a property. It knows about solid as a an actual value you can provide. There's no, I'm trying to bring up integrated API documentation. It doesn't know that position only has a constrained set of potential values. So while it can complete absolute, it will show all types of other things that wouldn't make any sense there as values for position. So I think you get the idea. And there's not even a structure view for CSS at this point. There is, I showed it for JavaScript. There's one for TypeScript, but again, it's a pretty simple one. It's not based on an actual parser. It's based on kind of a simple heuristic kind of scraping of declarations, which again has served quite well, but we can do more. Okay, so I think we've kind of proven the point there as far as what the before looks like. Now, how can we get a better experience? Well, when I went to look, there is actually a new plugin, relatively recent, since late May of this year, called LSP4IJ from Red Hat. I think you're probably familiar with them from enterprise Linux distributions, and what it means is language server protocol. You can even see it called out down here for IntelliJ, but it's not just for IntelliJ. It's for all of the JetBrains IDEs, and in fact, specifically all the JetBrains IDEs that are supported by Illuminated Cloud, including the community editions, and that's what's important here. And like I said, this is a pretty recent edition. It is started May 21st. It's been revved pretty frequently since then. I've actually started to contribute to this. I'm very impressed with it. Once I did the initial integration with Illuminated Cloud, I decided two things. One, there were some gaps I wanted to fill and some basically bugs I wanted to potentially help fix. And two, users of my product are going to gain value from this, and so I wanted to give some back to the folks at Red Hat who are kindly giving this away free and open source. And so I've integrated this into Illuminated Cloud in a lightweight fashion. So let's just take a look at what that looks like. Let's go back over here, and I'm going to enable a new application level Illuminated Cloud option under Lightning Web Components. That's where I'd added the ability to enable or disable TypeScript support. And now you can integrate LSP4IJ for an enhanced LWC development experience. Now, this is normally enabled by default. I disabled it for the purposes of this demo at the beginning so that you didn't see these banners. I basically didn't want to have those kind of muddy the discussion while I was showing the behavior before. But you can see that in all these files it's showing up, and it's effectively saying, Red Hat's LSP4IJ, excuse me, can provide a better experience for this type of file in a community edition IDE. Now, if you don't want to do this, if you want to keep things the way they are because you're not comfortable installing someone else's free open source plugin, completely understandable. You can just disable this and it will work exactly like it always has. It's not forced on you or anything like that, but it is suggested by default. We're not going to do that here. Instead, we're going to go ahead and install it. So we'll go ahead and install it here, and it's going to say, okay, this is LSP4IJ is from Red Hat. It is a free open source project. It is not a first class component of Illuminated Cloud. It is not from Rose Silver Software, my company that creates Illuminated Cloud. Just a little bit of CYA here and a little bit of kind of separation of concerns. And if issues are found here, they generally need to be attributed and kind of logged in the LSP4IJ public issue tracker on their GitHub repository. Now, just as with issues that are found in the underlying JetBrains IDEs and in Salesforce technologies like the Salesforce CLI or the Salesforce API, if you're not sure where the line is between Illuminated Cloud and in this case LSP4IJ, feel free to reach out to me through the my public issue tracker, through the support email, and I'll redirect you if necessary. And as I said, I'm a contributor over there, so it's very possible I may just end up taking off my Illuminated Cloud hat and putting on my LSP4IJ contributor hat and helping to field whatever the problem is that you've identified. I don't know, but the point is that this is an integration with another product and not something that is a first-class feature of Illuminated Cloud. But I think we'll see it's a very useful one. If you click Show Details, it's just going to open that same page that I just showed that shows the details about the plugin. So we're going to go ahead and just install it. So it's going to bring up the JetBrains plugin marketplace, pre-filtered for stuff by Red Hat and the keyword LSP4IJ. And so it's going to show these two. We don't need Quarkus tools. We only need LSP4IJ. So I'm going to go ahead and have that install. And after it installs, I'm going to go ahead and have it restart the IDE so that we can see the benefits of this particular plugin. So not sure why it's taken so long to install. This is kind of odd. There it goes. Okay, you never know. Nothing like a live demo. All right, let's go ahead and restart the IDE. And sorry for the moment of silence there. Okay, so the IDE is restarted. That plugin is now installed. And we can see a different banner at the top. Now it's saying that LSP4IJ is installed, but it's not configured for, in this case, CSS files. It's not configured for TypeScript files and JavaScript files. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have it install some language servers. Now, the TypeScript language server is actually, because TypeScript is effectively a statically typed superset of JavaScript, it can handle both. So what we're going to do is go ahead and say that we want to configure that. And then similarly, there's a separate one for CSS. Now, what we can see also over here is that there is now a new tool window on the side from this plugin where you can see the information about your language servers. We're going to return to this a couple times. If we wanted to, we could create a new language server based on one of their kind of pre-canned templates, including TypeScript or CSS, but Illuminated Cloud can actually help us out a little bit more here. So we'll go ahead and say we want to configure the TypeScript language server. And by the way, again, if you get this far and say, you know what, I don't want to do this, say don't ask again, and you can just go and uninstall the plugin if you want. So we're going to go ahead and say we want to configure it. Now these two language servers that we're going to use, they're implemented in Node.js. They are installed via npm, and so Illuminated Cloud is just going to go out and do exactly that. It's going to install this for you at the kind of at your user home directory level, so that across projects you only need one of them instead of per project. And this one has already been installed, and we can see that this banner went away, and we can see that in the TypeScript file the banner went away, and we can see that it hasn't gone away for CSS files. And if we look over here, we can see we now have an installed TypeScript language server. It's actually been started, and it's automatically configured for star.js and star.ts, and it's already got some configuration information. Again, we're going to come back, we're going to change some of this configuration information to understand a little bit about what that does. But first, let's get the CSS language server going. And so the CSS language server is from Microsoft. It's part of their language server pack that actually is the same one that sits behind VS Code. And so it just got installed, or in this case, slightly updated. And you see the banner went away up there. And so what's changed here? You may be able to see some changes immediately. So for example, colors here now have a little inlay showing a color swatch. So we can see that. What other things are actually happening here? In fact, if we want to see more about colors, we can say something like a background color, and you can see the code completion there. That's actually a real code completion coming from the language server, not from kind of some simple syntax from the from Illuminated Cloud in its community edition, a simple file type. And if I hit enter, now we actually are showing actual nice completions with little color previews and such. And we can say Alice Blue, and that would get it inserted. I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of that so that we're retaining the original file. But we can also see that we have integrated documentation. If we wanted to open it externally, we could see the actual MDN page on that. If we go back down here to position, remember we had completions for position as a property, but it didn't care at all about its constrained set of values. And now we can see that we're only seeing the constrained set of values and some word completions. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Those will be filtered out with one of the enhancements that is currently in the pull request queue. And so, but you can see this is now constrained to the correct values and functions that can be used to set a value for the position property. And so, you know, those are already pretty significant enhancements. We now have a structure view for CSS. We can navigate up and down our various declarations in here using the IDE standard features. We can use code folding. Code folding actually works, and it knows about it. If you hover over here in the gutter, you can see the little, you know, kind of chevrons here that show where the code folding blocks are. We can destroy the formatting here, and then we can run the IDE's formatter, and it formats. And the only difference is that evidently the CSS formatter is configured to get rid of any trailing kind of empty new lines. So if we put that back, we actually have the same file. So quite a few enhancements there that we're already seeing. And then syntax validation, by the way. If we get rid of this, we can start seeing all types of real-time static code analysis and syntax error reporting. So we know when we have valid code or invalid code. Let's go over to the JavaScript file first. We're already seeing, again, some interesting information, some inlays here for things like where we have concretely inferred type information here, because these were imported as an array, things that were imported where they were all of type field ID. So it's able to infer that. We can see references and navigate through references. There is one bug right now that's being addressed with the IDE standard find references. See, it says there are no usages, but you can see that there obviously are. That should be fixed in the next build. We can see, again, static code analysis. get rid of this, and we have errors all over the place that have been reported. Really solid, immediate error reporting. Our code completion is much better. If we go to get field value, we can see now that that is actually this that was imported from the corresponding import above, and we know what its return value is. We know what its parameter signature is. We can see it with parameter info now. If we do the same thing we did earlier and have an invalid signature, we can see that it says that there's no corresponding signature. If we once again got rid of everything after this, we get a bunch of syntax. Well, we get a syntax error. It's doing pretty decent recovery there, and we get integrated API documentation for all this. So this is starting to look a lot better, a whole lot better. It's starting to look a lot like one of the commercial IDs. What we're going to show here doesn't quite reach the level of the commercial IDs. I'll talk about some of the differences, but it is night and day better. Next previous method navigation. Like I said, structure view, and this may not look different, but this is actually based on a parse tree. I think it becomes even more pronounced if we go over here to say we can navigate in. I'm going to navigate in against Lightning an element. I can go against HTML element, the good part. If I bring this up and show the structure view, we can see it's a much more complex structure view, again, based on a legitimate parse tree, an AST here. And so we can kind of back out of that and see. We can see that not only is it showing syntax errors, but it's also, as part of its static code analysis, showing opportunities for improvement. So we saw this previously in the demo for TypeScript, but this is JavaScript. It's saying, hey, there's not, we have very limited data type information here. Do we want to improve that? So again, there's a quick fix now integrated into the IDE. So I'm going to hit enter, and you can see that it inferred that as being type string. So that's correct. It did the right thing, and now we can work with record ID in a strongly typed manner in this file. Similar down here, it sees this wire annotated field contact that is going to end up being a record representation. Actually, it's going to end up being that tuple for a record representation, data and error, because it's a promise to resolve to a record representation. So if we say infer type of contact from usage, it actually does add a comment-based type hint. It does so saying, okay, we know that data is being used, dereferenced off of this, in a context where it expects a record representation with this fully qualified, imported from UI record API. If you wanted to, you could change this, as I showed previously, into a wire result, and you can see it's doing code completion right here against the library that gets generated by Illuminated Cloud, the standard library and stuff. So we can say record representation, and it will insert that with its fully qualified name. And now if we go down here, we can see that we have both data, and there are some limitations right here that are being addressed with code completion. So I'm going to go over a couple of characters with data, but also if I were to say error, we can see that it knows about error being a property on that kind of resolved promise. So much better code completions. Name field, if we bring up our information on that, it knows it's of type field ID and it's part of an import. It's basically an alias as a result of an import. Let's destroy all the formatting here and let's run our formatter. Okay, and so the formatter actually did what it was supposed to do. And let's take a look. There are some differences. We can see right here that the braces here, that evidently the original formatter for this file said that there should be a buffering of one space inside of non-empty braces. And we can see something similar down here where we have this object literal being passed to the wire adapter, and so we can fix that. So let's go back into our TypeScript language server and look at its configuration, and we can see that there's a lot of information here. So that was in a JavaScript file, so we're not going to mess with the TypeScript configuration now. You can see this is a live JSON editor. Right now it's not bound to a JSON schema. That's actually, again, work that's in the pipeline. That'll be coming so that you'll get syntax validation and code completion in here as well. But what we can do is for JavaScript, since we're fixing this for JavaScript files, go down to here, insert space after opening before closing non-empty braces. That's what we're dealing with. We'll change that from false to true. And we're going to go ahead and save this right here so that our changes we made are persisted. Scroll up so that we can see these two change lines and this change line, and let's run our formatter, and those lines are no longer changed. It actually picked up that formatting change. So there's actually an integrated configurable formatter. Let's go over to the TypeScript file and see if we can see similar. So we have similar types of inlays here. Again, we can see references here. We can see inferred data types, where inferred data types are available. Where we have static types, obviously we don't need that. we can see that we have code completions. Now, here's another place where I'm going to say one of my PRs that's currently under review is to the language server protocol, at least as far as we can tell, doesn't seem to indicate whether the integrated language, whether its grammar is case sensitive or case insensitive. So right now, LSP4IJ, when it creates code completions in the JetBrains IDE, specifies case insensitive as kind of a least common denominator approach. So one of the changes I've made is the ability to specify as part of the language server configuration whether the grammar should be considered case sensitive or case insensitive, and all the templates are already pre-configured for that. In general, you should never have to even worry about that. But what will happen is code completions will be offered in a case sensitive manner, provides a much better kind of signal to noise ratio. That combined with filtering out word completions when we get completions from the language server, another PR that I have under review, will provide very nice code completion. So we can see here it's still putting capitalized target before the actual one that we want in a case sensitive language. So again, probably by the time you're messing with this, that'll already be in the release that you're using, but you get the idea. But we're getting much better code completions. Value as a property here. If we go down here, we can actually show again code completion and some other stuff. So parameter object, there's a word completion, and I'm going to say custom wrapper, so we can do some kind of camel case completion. And I'm going to go ahead and say equals and hit enter, and we get the right level of indentation. And we can see the properties are here, some integer, some string. If we took out these word completions, as will happen, we'll get a really nice signal to noise ratio. So we'll say some string. Colon this dot string value, take that completion, and then I'll skip some integer because it's going to be just like some string, some list colon, and then you notice I don't have a terminator, statement terminator, a semicolon on this. I have my the formatter set up so that it will always add that at the end. We want that. You can obviously configure that the way you want, but all I did is hit a reformat code and it added the statement terminator. But now we can see we have an error because the language server is telling us that we have a duplicate definition, so that's a problem. So I'll just change this to be 2. And if I change this down here to be an object literal instead of being an array, we can see it saying, hey, we got basically a mismatch here in terms of expected versus actual data type being assigned to some list. So again, you're getting real-time syntax validation, code completion, the ability to navigate a code formatter, structure view, the ability to navigate up and down, and then obviously in and out of the file. So pretty darn good. In fact, again, we're in TypeScript now. Let's go ahead and destroy the formatting and let's format. And we have two differences. We have this and we have this, and they're the exact same difference that we saw with JavaScript, where the original formatter expected one space of kind of buffering inside of non-empty braces. So we'll just go back over here. We want TypeScript this time. We'll go back down to the corresponding property, non-empty braces, set it to true, save, come back over here, and we'll format, and we can see that this is now an unchanged file. It's not blue up here. So actually we're back exactly where we started. So now we have the code formatter adjusted for the actual existing code. And again, if I take out some like the opening brace here, we get just a cascade of errors. We can see them immediately, and if not, we end up back where we were. So a lot of power here. And by the way, if you also wanted to change the way that this all looks, we can open the IDE settings, and we can go into editor, and we can go into color scheme, and we go to language server. Now this is kind of a one size fits all. You're configuring it for all integrated languages, but in this case, like class declaration, it's saying it's inherited. Let's say we change it from being inherited to being, we want them italic. So italic as an override, a slight override, and we'll say apply, and we can see that that class definition changed to italic. And then if we basically say inherit again and say apply, it goes back. So that you can also continue to specialize here for the actual way that your actual source code looks, not just the way it gets formatted, but if you want to slightly tweak things because that draws your eye more distinctly to certain patterns than the default, then you can do that. Okay, so let's move on back over to CSS. I think we already looked at everything there, so I think that gives you a pretty darn good idea. So let's go back to my original statement that I made with the demo for Lightning Web Components TypeScript support, and that is if you're pairing Illuminated Cloud with the free Community Edition JetBrains IDE, I can't really recommend that you move on to TypeScript development, and you're probably also going to be limited with regard to even JavaScript development there because it's a much more complex toolkit. I don't think I can say that anymore. I think this has closed the gap significantly. So the differences between this and the commercial edition, commercial edition obviously it has a first-class integration with all these other toolkits with Jest. So there's no Jest test runner with the JavaScript and TypeScript debugger. That's not going to be here. When you go to compile, in fact, I'll do that right now. Let's go ahead and compile this and deploy it. So I just did a push. It's compiling TypeScript files. It's having to use the external TypeScript compiler. Takes about 5 or 6 seconds, 6 seconds to do it, 121 files, not bad, but it's sub-second if you're using a commercial IDE. But still, it works. So you can basically do TypeScript Lightning Web Components development, and it's only going to add a slight amount of overhead. If you're not doing TypeScript using JavaScript, that overhead's not there at all. You still get all these benefits. But if you're writing Jest tests, you can actually write them. All the code completion's there. It knows about Jest. You can see that it knows about describe. It knows about after each and can tell you about that. So all that's there, but there's not an integrated test runner. I have considered doing kind of a very simple integrated test runner, but there still wouldn't be a debugger, and I'm not going to implement a JavaScript or TypeScript debugger for Community Edition IDEs. So that would still be a small gap there. I think the biggest gap probably has to do with the fact that these language servers that conform to language server protocol are generally constrained to a single language, so you don't get this polyglot behavior. So when you have references that cross language boundaries, as happens all over the place in Salesforce, those references aren't going to be tracked. So when we see references to a property here, it doesn't know that that property, for example, is used in HTML, that the language server does not. Now, Illuminated Cloud, if we go over here and we look for contact, it does. It knows about that, and it added a reference so you can navigate even in Community Edition, but the inverse of that is not true. The language server doesn't know about it. So if I renamed this, at least right now, the language server is not going to include that in its rename. And by the way, rename is handled here. So if I say rename, it does have that as a simple refactoring. I can say contact to, and it's actually renamed that. But again, it didn't rename that in HTML. So that's now a broken reference. So you would need to go and catch that up. That doesn't mean it's not still valuable. It does a lot of the work for you, but it's not as complete as it would be in a commercial edition IDE. I think you get the idea. So, I mean, that's what I wanted to show in terms of what this adds to it. I think it's pretty tremendous, and it's only going to get better. And when I say it's only going to get better, it's actually a pretty good segue. Let's go over here, and again, this is the plugin page that opens when you say show details, and we can go over here to their issue tracker. Actually, before we do that, let's go to versions, and we can look here, and we can see that like 0.8.1, if we look at the changelog for it, and for 0.8.0, I'll show you, this is kind of when I jumped in, we can see my little smiling face right here, barely, but we can see that, on 0.8.0, I contributed the next previous method action implementations. On 0.8.1, I contributed the JSON editors for configuration. They were just really simple text fields, so I contributed those, and I contributed go-to declaration actually landing on the name identifier instead of at the beginning of the declaration. It's just a usability improvement, and I'm continuing to do that. I'm actually planning to, until I kind of get to a certain point, I am planning to contribute, probably, say 20% of my time, 10% of my time weekly away from Illuminated Cloud, with the idea that it is for Illuminated Cloud. It's to improve the experience for Illuminated Cloud users who use free Community Edition IDEs. So let's go back over here and let's go to the issue tracker in GitHub, and we'll go ahead and filter by author. I'll show you some of the things I'm working on. I've already mentioned some of them as we've been going through this. So the closed ones here are the ones that you saw that I've already contributed. Everything kind of from here down is already in the review process, in the pull request review process. So go to class contributor. That's actually something I didn't show over here, but if you want to go to something, say, let's go over here and say, sorry, in the TypeScript. And if I say, handle number change, I can actually go to that, to the actual symbols that are called handle name change, handle number change, just by typing down. What's missing right now is if I wanted to say Apex imperative method with complex params on GoToType, it's not there. It is in GoToSymbol, Apex imperative method with complex params, and we can see that. But a lot of people, their kind of muscle memory, mine certainly is trained to go to Control N or Command O on Mac and start typing, kind of camel case the name of a type, and that's not currently implemented, but it will be. It's already in the review process. The code completions case sensitivity thing that I mentioned, this one's actually already resolved. Go to implementation, so the ability to traverse down an inheritance hierarchy, whether it's from a type or whether it's from from base method to overridden methods. Get rid of redundant word completions. These are all in the review process. process. The other ones are effectively where there are currently, I've recognized some language server protocol features that have not yet been implemented by LSP4IJ or have been partially implemented, but they correlate very well with JetBrains custom language features. So for example, a traversal up and down a type hierarchy, and then the ability to have a really kind of parse tree aware selection range to expand and contract selection. It's something I use all the time in languages that support it. I miss it, so I'm going to implement it, and it'll be there. On type formatting, so when you if you add an open brace or add braces around something, it'll automatically, as you're typing, format the contents of that brace if they're present. And so again, that'll be something that you can turn on or off as you want. But if it's on, then you'll have to spend less time actually calling the actual formatter. It'll be doing it on the fly as you're typing. So like I said, as I'm finding things, I'm opening them here, and when I open them, I'm expecting to implement them myself. I'm just telling them to send them over to me. The team's been very accommodating, very wonderful. It's a great set of folks over there that I've been able to work with. All right, so I think that's the end. That's what I wanted to show. As I said earlier, LSP4IJ is not it's not part of Illuminated Cloud. It's integrated into Illuminated Cloud. So if you find issues, let me know about them first. I'll probably redirect you here. You may end up opening an issue here. I'll provide some additional context that'll help myself and other people who might look at it, understand what it is you're asking for if it's not obvious. Otherwise, if you decide to play with this, let me know if you find any issues. This is an 0.8 level thing at this point in time. It's not a 1.0 thing. So there are omissions that are being filled in. There are also still bugs, and those will need to be addressed. Report them. Let us know about them. But I think you've already seen it's in a pretty advanced state, and I think it completely changes the editor experience for those of you that are using Illuminated Cloud with Community Edition IDs. I think it really, really, really provides a nice experience, short of going out and purchasing the commercial edition from JetBrains, which I recommend. But I understand that your company may not support that. They may be fine paying for Illuminated Cloud, but when you add a commercial JetBrains ID, it kind of pushes it over. So hopefully this helps to kind of fill that gap. Thank you very much for your time, and like I said, let me know your experience. Take care.